Do you remember? Do you remember? I remember all those years.
Oh, I remember. I remember.
Hello and welcome to the Do You Remember podcast. I'm your host, Adam Anwar, and today I'm joined by stand-up comedian Rou Stellin.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So for the people who might not know, can you give us a brief synopsis of what it is?
So basically, it's a children's book about this horrifically abused child who goes off to boarding school, and there's also magic.
Let's take us back in time then. When was the first time that you remember hearing about Harry Potter?
Well, I kind of lived under a rock, and I never heard of Harry Potter until one of my extended family members gave me The Chamber of Secrets for Christmas. So I didn't actually read The Philosopher's Stone until after I'd read The Chamber of Secrets.
What year do you reckon this is?
I think it will have been when I was about 10 or 11, so about Harry's age in the book, which I think it made quite a bit of an impression on me, because Harry's a bit of a weird kid that no one likes, and I was also very much kind of a weird kid that nobody liked.
It's interesting that you say that, because I rewatched the film today and I noticed a lot of things that I like about this film that I didn't realise as a child why I liked it, but now as an adult I can look back at, and obviously the book as well, the whole story, I can look back at it and go, that's why I liked it as a kid. And obviously we'll get on that later on, but I was completely oblivious to the facts of some of these things. But so what was your first impressions then when you read it?
Well, I already knew the characters because I'd read The Chamber of Secrets before that.
Mm-hmm.
But because I read The Chamber of Secrets first, I kind of didn't know that Harry lived in a cupboard, and kind of how horrible the Dursleys were to him before he became a wizard and kind of managed to escape from them a bit. Like they were really bad. Like there's a bit where Uncle Vernon tells him to go to his cupboard and says he's literally not going to feed him.
Yeah.
And it's just like, ugh. So
is this, when you read Chamber of Secrets, is this before the first film has come out, or is this afterwards?
When did the films come out? I
think the first film came out in 2000. It was 99, 2000, around that time.
I think the film had probably come out, but I think around that time I didn't have a TV. So right. I honestly didn't know anything about pop culture. I think I was still reading all the Animorphs books.
Okay, because my experience is like slightly similar to yours then, because the first Harry Potter book that I read was actually The Chamber of Secrets as well. But it was because I'd seen the film, and I'm in fact, going way back, I remember like in the late 90s, my mum reading the books to me and my sister, and like I wasn't really that bothered. I was just kind of just happy just for my mum to be reading me something and like just be chilling out, that kind of situation. But then the film comes out, and I absolutely loved the film, and I don't know why I never connected with the book, but like I really loved the film when I first saw it. And then we was on holiday in Poland like for 6 weeks, one summer holiday, and my sister brought me one, I can't remember what it was, but the second one was like The Chamber of Secrets, and I was like, okay, I love the film, so I might as well give this a go. I've got nothing to do for these 6 weeks. I can't speak the language, and I just sat there reading like through the Chamber of Secrets weeks, and then I was hooked. I couldn't wait to like get back home and like read because she had by that time the third one as well. I don't think the fourth one was out yet, so I was in a similar situation to you. So you read the second one, and then you went back and read the first one after that. So comparing it to the film, then, do you prefer the books over the film?
I do. What I did notice though is that reading the book back as an adult, I remember when I first watched the film, I kind of was like, oh, they've dumbed it down so much, and they really haven't dumbed it down as much as I thought they had. Right. I suppose I added a lot of detail in my head because I read it when I was a kid and it seemed a lot more complex.
Because it's quite a common theme, isn't it? Like I always thought it was a pretentious thing for people to say, like, "Oh, the book's so much better than the film." But I honestly felt it with Harry Potter. Like, and to be honest, it's the first real book that I actually read where I'd seen the film as well. And what I did was, because I started on the second book after seeing the first film, I went through and then read all the books before I saw like the second film or whatever. So, what do you reckon? Like, you mentioned that you could relate to the character of Harry Potter. So, what was the appeal for you with the book?
Well, in the very first chapter, they talk about how it's almost from the point of view of the Dursleys and how they've got this weird side of their family. And right away I was like, oh, that's like my side of my family, because kind of my mum was estranged from her whole family. And so it's like, oh, that's kind of like my family. And then later on, when they introduced Harry, he's kind of like small and weird, and he's kind of like shabbily dressed, and people make fun of him.
Yeah.
And that was a lot like me at the time. So I was like, oh, I didn't realize at the time, but I really identified with Harry.
Definitely. I mean, I might as well touch on the thing that I realized that I really related to him in this book when I was watching the film, is that you've got this kid, and like he's poorly treated at home. Now, I wasn't poorly treated at home, so I can't say that I was under the stairs and all that stuff. But like, I could really relate to the fact that he's like, he's quite showily dressed. He's a poor kid, even though he's not in a poor household. Whereas, like, I was a poor kid, but then all of a sudden he gets this letter through the post of something that he never knew he was involved in, and he gets transported basically into this world where he's somebody. He's not just that kid who like lives under the stairs and gets bullied by his like cousin and his like parents, his auntie and uncle anymore. He's a kid well respected by so many people, and he's got this like great amount of wealth in the bank. And I look back at it as like a kind of escapism as a child, like, oh my god, that would be so cool to just find out all of a sudden that I'm somebody special and I've got all this money, and everybody likes me even though they never met me before. Everybody likes him straight away, and I like that kind of living vicariously through someone else, and that kind of escapism, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and he kind of immediately falls into place. Like, he makes great friends right away. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
That's probably the least realistic thing in the book. I feel like in school I went through about 10 different sets of friends, but he meets Ron in the first 5 minutes, and they're best friends for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, it's like the first kid that he meets from Hogwarts is Ron, isn't it? Like he meets him on the platform, and he's like, "Oh, this is my best mate for life." And he meets his future wife on the platform as well, because his sister's there too.
Yep, they all meet in that on that train, and it's set forever. And I suppose that's kind of what you want as a kid. Like, you kind of want to just make a friend who's going to be your friend for life, and for everything to just fall into. It's a very childish view of what a good life is going to be like. And I know obviously it has struggles in the books, but in some ways everything just kind of happens for him as well.
Yeah, you're right. I know J.K. Rowling's a very controversial person at the moment, but I mean, I think that's a real part of the power of how she wrote this book. Is she kind of wrote it for like exactly how a child would want to be. So you take him from like the lowest status possible, like his parents were murdered as a child and he was really mistreated, and then all of a sudden, wham, he's got these like best friends, and he's got all this wealth, and all these adults respect him, not just his peers. All these adults respect him as well. And then he turns up at school, and he's the top athlete in school. He's the youngest seeker in a century, and not just that, he's winning the game of the big rival match against Slytherin. And like you said, he falls right into place, into this great place. So let's dive into it, shall we? Then the full story from beginning to end. It starts off. I can't remember how it starts off in the book. Can you remember how it starts off? Is it the same in the film?
Well, I've actually only seen the film once or twice, but in the book, it starts off with Mr. Dursley, and he goes to work, and he keeps seeing all these people with cloaks, and owls flying out. and he's wondering if it's about the Potters, his extended family, and he's like really worried. And then Dumbledore and McGonagall turn up at the house after Mr. Dursley's gone to bed, and then Hagrid shows up on the big motorbike, and they literally leave him on the doorstep. And I always assumed that they put some kind of spell on him or something, or did something to make sure that he stayed. I mean, it is summer, but it's it's the night,
Yeah.
and they just like leave him on the doorstep. They don't even knock; they just leave him there.
Yeah. There is a lot of really messed up things about this film that, like, again, as an adult today, when I was watching it, I was like, I can't believe they just did that, and I can't believe they let that go on, and doing that, just leaving the baby in the middle of the night on the doorstep, going, obviously he's going to be safe there. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
I mean, she could have easily put in, like, with a swish of his wand, there was a glow, and you could see that the baby was warm. Like, she could have put that in. She could have done.
I even just transported it through the window and like into the living room, like in a nice safe place where like no animals could get to him, or you know what? Oh,
I know. And that's kind of what makes it funny. The way that because I'm reading the version I've been rereading is the American version. Everything's Americanized. They're all saying
about that.
Oh, well, they're all saying like mom and candy and stuff. Just little words have been changed, but they've kept Hagrid's accent the same. So Hagrid's still got that really strong, like, regional British accent. But then they're all like, mom. Your mom.
It really frustrated me as a kid when I found out that the Philosopher's Stone was renamed the Sorcerer's Stone in America. I was like, why? It doesn't make any sense. And again, at the same time, I seem to have this memory of like the book would come out, I think slightly before in America. Maybe the film definitely came out slightly before in America. One of the two. I might be conflating the two. And I was always really frustrated. Like, no, this is an English film. This is an English book. It should be coming out at least at the same time, if not in England first. Why is it coming out in America first? But obviously that's where all the money is. And yeah, I've read.
Sorry,
No, go on.
some of the things that they've changed are utterly ridiculous, though. Like, because I read it a lot as a kid, and I read it and reread it and reread it, I can just tell when something's changed. And so every time I come across something that's been changed, I just know. And there's a bit where they describe Dudley as a baby, and they say that he looks like a pink beach ball wearing assorted bobble hats. Now, they've changed that in the Sorcerer's Stone into assorted bonnets. Like,
What's the point?
I really don't understand why they've kept, like, because they've kept it set in England.
Yeah.
But they've made them all talk like Americans. It just doesn't make sense. Like, do they really think that American kids are that stupid that they're not going to figure out what a bobble hat is?
Yeah, because that was the whole thing, wasn't it? Why they changed the name to Sorcerer's Stone. I only recently researched this because we were doing the podcast, but apparently the reason why they changed the name from Philosopher's Stone was because they thought American kids would not buy something that said philosopher on it, so it had to say sorcerer because it was more mystical. And I was like, what a stupid thing to think of, as if like American children are so different from English children that they cannot accept it if it's different. But again, can you imagine the person who had that job to go through the book and like Americanize all these words? Like, what a strange job that would have been.
There's documents online where you can actually go and look through the changes, which so somebody's actually gone and read through, and some of the things that they've changed are literally they've just changed the dates round. So like September 1st instead of 1st of September, they've changed that.
Oh, it's so bizarre, like that they would go to that length. It's like you're translating it into another language. Just it's bizarre. But so I mean, the film starts off very similar to that then. So but it doesn't have the whole people in cloaks and Vernon Dursley being like worried and thinking, "Oh, this might be about the Potters." It just starts off with Dumbledore walking down the street, and then McGonagall turns up, then Hagrid turns up. But you mentioned as well that you've only actually seen the film a few times. So why is that? Why have you only seen it a few times?
Well, I've probably seen bits of it loads because my mum absolutely loved the films. She read all the books. not with me, but I had them, so she read them all.
Hmm.
And she would watch the films every time they were on TV. But I really didn't like them. Like, especially, I think I've watched them all, but I remember really disliking the first one, apart from the bit where the kid says the new Nimbus 2000, because that's my favorite line. But towards the end of the movies, they started changing some things that just didn't make sense for the storyline, just so
Yeah.
that just because it was easier, I suppose, it was easier to shoot it that way.
Yeah, that's where I really started to have that thought process that the book was better than the film. The further we got along in the films, and like the more, obviously, you know yourself, as we get further along the books, they get thicker and thicker and thicker, don't they? And there's so much detail in them, and then there's just so much detail that was missed out of the films that I kind of felt that detail was why I loved those books, and because the films missed them out. I still really enjoy the films, don't get me wrong, but not to the extent that I did of the book. I mean, I'm not a huge reader, so I only actually read all the books once. But especially this film, the first film, I must have watched this countless times as a kid, but I've not. Besides today, I haven't watched it for about 15 years. It was a bit of an eye opener. Again, seeing it as an actual adult.
Because I was reading the American version, it's very Americanized. It kind of it made me feel like it was like, think about what it would be like if it was set in America, and I'm just imagining this baby sitting on this doorstep getting eaten by a frigging coyote or something.
Yeah.
They've not done anything to protect it, or at least they've not said that they have. But no, that was what I was getting towards before, and then I just got hung up on all the things that they changed.
All the Americanisms. Yeah. Because this would be like a very different book as well if it was American. Because I kind of feel like the Englishness of it is kind of has like a certain charm to it that makes it kind of a bit more realistic. Where I kind of feel like if this was like written by an American writer, it would have been far more over the top and cartoony, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Also, a lot of the kind of charm of the wizarding world in Harry Potter comes from how old everything is, which
Yeah.
things that only be a few hundred years old. Like, I think he goes to get his wand, and Ollivander says like established 800 BC or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Ridiculously old. It wouldn't really, like, they wouldn't have that in if it was American, unless you know it was kind of a more, although that would be an interesting book to read, a more kind of indigenous American based magic world. That would be an interesting read, but I mean,
that would be a lot more interesting than a modern American world for sure.
Yeah. I can't see JK writing that story somehow.
No. So we get to we start to see modern day Harry now, and like he's under the stairs, and like Aunt Petunia's banging on the door, and Uncle Vernon's like making him like cook his sausage and bring his coffee and all this stuff. And it's Dudley's birthday, and he's like running up and down the stairs. He's like, "Come on, cousin, we're going to the zoo," and he's like slamming the door in his face and all that stuff. And we're really seeing this like disparity between Harry and Dudley, which I think, again, it's really good because it really makes like you feel sorry for Harry, and it kind of makes you relate to the Harry character rather than the Dursley character. The Dudley character, because he's got what is it, like 32 presents, but like last year it was 35 or whatever it is.
Yeah, and it's kind of made all the worse reading it as an adult and realizing just how much money Vernon Dursley must have, because he runs his own company.
Yeah,
like,
there's that scene later on where there's that scene later on where like he just decides, right, we're going away, and they go to like a very deserted, remote island, and it's like, yeah, as if someone could just afford to like go there. Like that shows like how much he's got. But go on, sorry.
Yeah, and Dudley having 30 odd presents for his birthday, and they're all expensive. Like, obviously at the time, reading it as a kid, I knew that those were all good presents, but I couldn't actually comprehend how much actual money they were worth. Like, he gets a gold watch, he gets a new TV, he gets, I think it says 17 games, something like that. He gets a bunch of like whatever PlayStation games or whatever game console it is. It just says computer, but he gets a bunch of different games, and it's like, and he's still not satisfied, and I can kind of comprehend as an adult more just how spoiled that child is, and how much money they have to still put Harry in like cast-offs.
Yeah, definitely. It kind of layers them as bad guys, doesn't it? Because as a child, you can look at it and go, "Oh my god, they're bad because of this." But then as an adult, you can look back and go, "Wow, like they have all these means, but they still treat him like shit." Like we found out in later films that like there is a spare bedroom upstairs that he could have that he ends up having, but like they just keep him under the stairs for the sake of it to like keep him down. And it's like, by the end of the books, I really wanted like the Dudleys to have like a kind of a positive outcome, and I really wanted them to be like to good out of it. And I can't remember how they ended, but they never had like that full circle moment where they came out. Oh, sorry, 180-degree moment where they come back and are completely refreshed characters. And the reason why they keep them on the stairs because that was a magically secure spot. Maybe they could have come up with something like that, but they just never did.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of gave Dudley a little bit of a redemption. Like in one of the later books, I don't know if it happens in the films, but Harry saves them both from Dementors, and Dudley has a bit of a redemption where he stands up to his dad saying, if he'd not saved me from that thing, and Dudley kind of sticks up for him, and you see how Dudley could turn out to be an okay character. They did that.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, you're right. But we get
It wasn't
like
much though.
no.
It didn't really make up for years of bullying.
Yeah, years of being under the stairs, but I'm going to stick up for you once when we're 15, so we're even, yeah.
Yeah.
So we get our first bit of a comeback on Dudley where they go to the zoo and like he's leaning on the glass and Harry makes the glass disappear. He doesn't know how he's made the glass disappear, but Harry's made the glass disappear, and he's talking to the snake as well. So it's kind of a loaded scene, this one, because obviously they're going to pay off the fact that he's talking to the snake in the next film when we find out he's a parcel tongue. But in this film, we just get that nice bit of revenge on Dudley where he kind of falls in the snake tank and he's being made to look a fool and he's scared because the snake's crawling out.
It is one of the things that you kind of, because so much is happening in those first few chapters or the first few scenes in the film that you do kind of gloss over him speaking to the snake, and it's only when it comes to the Chamber of Secrets that you're like, oh yeah, he did actually speak to the snake, didn't he? Which I do think that's good. I think that's good writing, to be fair.
Yeah, definitely. There's especially in the film, because again I can't really remember the books. It's been so many years since I've read the book, but especially in the film, they do fit so much into the first few minutes, and I think that's always an example of a good film where you establish so many characters and you establish the stakes really early on. And obviously the stakes here is that like if he has to stay with his family, he's in a really terrible situation, but he manages to better his life by going to Hogwarts, and they go to the remote island as I just said. But oh no, sorry, I missed something out. I missed something very important out. One of my favourite scenes in the film where all the letters are coming through the letterbox. I think that's a great scene because obviously one comes and Uncle Vernon rips it up, and then 2 or 3 come, and then he rips them all up until the point where like hundreds and thousands are like coming through the door.
Yeah, I do like that scene. I remember that scene from the film and thinking like the way that they shot it really kind of captured everyone's emotions on the topic of the letters, Harry trying to get them and Uncle Vernon destroying them.
Yeah, and it felt like a really like triumphant moment as well, because you know when like you have all these kind of award ceremonies or like sporting competitions where like the winner and then they'll have all this confetti flying through the air. It kind of looked like that with all the letters flying about. It kind of felt like a triumphant moment for Harry, but unfortunately, Uncle Vernon kept all the letters away from him. They moved to this remote island, which is literally like an island in the middle of nowhere with like very choppy seas, so like no one can get there. So how they got there, God only knows. Maybe it's a helicopter or something. But then we get Hagrid turning up and he utters those famous words, "You're a wizard, Harry."
Yeah, and I think in the book it's actually like you're a wizard and that's it.
Yeah.
Which is a bit sad. Which is a bit sad to read back because they are kind of iconic words, aren't they? It's kind of like when you find out that Darth Vader didn't actually say, "Luke, I am your father." It's one of those. You go,
Yeah,
oh, he doesn't actually say you're a wizard, Harry. He goes,
yeah,
well,
'cause-
you're a wizard.
yeah, and like to read that in the book after seeing the film is probably like quite anticlimactic because you're waiting for these like huge big words. But I think this is like a great scene again. This is like Harry's real triumphant moment where like he's like, "What? I'm a wizard." Like, yeah, we've not told you. Like, told me what? And like he starts to get like filled in the background, and then they go on the big shopping trip to London, and this is where he starts to slowly start to realize a lot of stuff because they're in the pub. And a lot of people are like trying to shake his hand and going, "Oh my goodness, Harry Potter, as I live and breathe," or whatever.
Mm.
And he goes to Ollivanders and he gets the wand that it came from the Phoenix, who give 2 feathers for wands, and one was in this wand and one was in Voldemort's wand, and he starts to find out that he who shall not be named, and that's Voldemort and all that stuff. And again, this is our first glimpse into the real wizarding world. And again, as a child watching it, I'm thinking like, oh my god, this looks amazing. Can you imagine being like a poor kid, and then one day somebody turning up and going, here's unimaginable wealth, and here's this, not just unimaginable wealth, but in a world where like you're going to be able to learn and do things that are beyond the imagination in this magical world. And it's really exciting as a child to watch that.
Yeah, and it's kind of a Cinderella story for people who don't like princesses. It's
I
it's
think that's a good way to say it, actually. Yeah.
yeah, or a Pretty Woman scenario where kind of take a kind of low stakes character and put him into this world where kind of a lot of his dreams come true kind of overnight.
Yeah, I think I've never looked at it like that before, but I think this is like the male version of like Cinderella, as it were, because like he has that same kind of transformation process where like he's in the family and he's being looked down on, and then he finds out he's something special. Yeah, I think that there's something to that.
Yeah, instead of the fairy godmother, he's got a half giant
Yeah,
stepfather, which nobody gives Hagrid the credit that he deserves for the way that he treats Harry. He's like more of a father figure to him than anybody else.
yeah, he's like his main protector, isn't he? His main, well, not parent, but you know, that kind of figure. Right.
Yeah.
So,
And when he gives him the birthday cake, like, I don't know why, but that touched me so much. Even though I've read it so many times, I'm always touched when he gives him the birthday cake. And
yeah, because it's so sloppy as well, but it's such a cute moment. Like, oh my, like you tried so much, and he goes, "Oh, I've never had a birthday cake before."
yeah, and yeah, you really sense that like everything. It kind of sums up how everything must mean so much more to Harry because he's got so little. Like every little nice thing that Hagrid does for him is massive because no one's ever been nice to him.
Yeah, and those are the things to him as well that mean more than like all that glory and fame. Like he doesn't really take it on, does he? He doesn't really like, oh, I am Harry Potter, I'm something special. He doesn't play that card, or he doesn't really play the whole like money bags kind of role. Like, oh, I'm rich, but I can do whatever I want. It's the small things like Hagrid made me this cake. Oh, that's great, and like we're gonna see it, like pretty soon. But like he became friends with Ron on the train, so he's not going to sell him out just because Malfoy says so. He's going to stick by him because he was his friend on the train.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, I love this like little train journey to Hogwarts that they have now. We get the infamous 9 3/4 ticket. What the hell's 9 3/4? How do I get there? The Weasleys help him get there. At least in the film, they do. I can't remember how he does it in the book. I think, is it Strangers in the book, or is it the Weasleys?
It is the Weasleys. He just overhears them. He overhears them talking about Muggles, and so he goes up and asks. I think
Yes.
it plays out pretty much the same in the film.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same. Yeah, and then they sat in the train. He sat with Ron, and then the cart comes past. And again, huge moment for a kid. The cart comes past. Anything from the trolley, yeah, we'll take everything. Like that as a child is like the peak of life, really. Like being able to have all the sweets that you want. Like incredible.
Yeah, and it is weird to think because he's literally 11 years old at this time.
Yeah,
and that for an 11-year-old, that must be an amazing feeling.
Yeah, because that is the peak of what you want as a child. You want the sweets, and you want all the sweets, and you want them all now. And like, he's going to learn to be a magician soon, so he doesn't need games or anything like that. And he's going to become the star athlete and all this stuff, and he's going to become Mr. Popular and have all these friends. But to be able to do that, and that's the only real time that I think in the entire book series where he splashes the money. I think maybe does he buy someone a house at some point, maybe. But I think this is the only time that he splashes the money, and it's something really innocent and cute because he wants to share it with his friends.
Yeah. I don't think he often splashes his money about, but he's kind of shown being generous quite a bit. Like, I
Yeah.
think he gets all the Lockhart books for free, he gets them given, and he gives them to Ginny.
Yeah,
And
he
buys
does.
his
Yeah.
own. And stuff like that. And I think he always buys like nice presents for his friends and stuff.
Yeah, that was always a weird one for me as a kid as well. Like the Weasleys are shown as this poor family, and I was always like, because I was a poor kid myself, and I was like, but you wizards, like, can you not just make money or something? Like, why? I didn't understand it because I would be like, that'd be the first thing as a poor kid that I would want to do is like, I want to learn how to make money.
Yeah, and all the things that they don't have, there seem to be spells that it seems that there would be spells that could solve it.
Yeah, definitely, and like, that's one of like the frustrating things of this. I mean, it's there for a purpose. It needs the poor friend, and the poor friend needs to be the one with the morals and to the grit, as it were, to help him get through certain situations.
Saying
So
that as well. Sorry, go
no, go on.
on. It's kind of, I think it can be kind of explained by the fact that not everyone's good at every type of magic. So there might be a spell that make your clothes look brand new, but you might not be very good at doing it. Like, everyone always jokes about how Harry's the best at Expelliarmus, and like that's the only spell he ever uses.
Yeah,
But there's a reason for that. Some of his other spells aren't that good, and so kind of maybe the same with the Weasleys. There are spells that could make, you know, all their money worries obsolete,
yeah,
but they might not necessarily be great at doing them.
yeah. That's a good point. That's a good point. But then again, you would have thought with all those kids in the family that one of them would be able to learn this one and one would be able to learn that one. But yeah,
I know high
it's a children's
achievers
book.
as well.
We don't need to overthink it, I suppose. But I guess that's what I'm doing. So yeah, he gets to the school. He has that first confrontation with Malfoy, where Malfoy's like, "This is Crabbe and Goyle," and I think that's the only time Crabbe and Goyle's mentioned in the first one. But to me, they do it because obviously, because I read the books, they were really big characters. Crabbe and Goyle to me are like really big bad guys that needed to be overcome.
Yeah, and they really. I mean, Malfoy isn't either. Like, he's never really at any point the main villain. He's just kind of Harry Potter's enemy.
Yeah,
But Crabbe and Goyle literally don't have personality. They're just two large people. They don't have.
yeah,
They're just. I don't know. They're very two-dimensional characters. Reading it now, it's kind of they barely even exist. They've
yeah. I
got.
think they kind of just used as like bodyguards, aren't they, for Malfoy in the book, and like to put it into like a video game perspective, they're like, or like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a good like parallel in my head. Is like you've got all those little foot soldiers in Ninja Turtles who like get easily beaten, and then you've got like the main bad guy who's like Malfoy, and then you've got like the end level boss who's like Voldemort, and like Harry Potter's like mainly dealing with these like foot soldiers and like main bad guy, and he's got to spend all of his time kind of combating them, not so much on a physical basis, but like verbally and stuff like that. And then obviously in the end, he's always got to deal with Voldemort.
Yeah.
So they get to Hogwarts. He's had this little kick off with him, but he's no, I'm side with Ron. Ron's my friend, and then we get to the Sorting Hat scene. The Sorting Hat scene. Everyone loves the Sorting Hat scene. I think. How was it for you in the book?
Well, the hat sings a song, and it's very long, and there's a different song in every book, and I could never be doing with that. I always skim through that part. The hat singing about some nonsense, but
Yeah.
but I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting reading back the first book. All these scenes, reading these scenes back, knowing what happens later in the series, and being like, "Oh, no wonder the Hat thought that he'd do well in Slytherin.
Yeah.
No wonder that wand liked him."
Yep.
Like, oh, there's reasons. There's reasons.
Yeah. The main thing for me like that is always watching Snape, because obviously we know how Snape turned out, and we know how he was portrayed all the way through. He was like seen as the bad guy above Malfoy, but then obviously he has this redemption at the end, and you find out he's been a good guy all along.
Yeah, I mean, in theory.
Nick one.
Well, yeah, like he did some good things, but he kind of was still a bad guy. Like he still called Harry's mum a literal slur, and like the worst slur as well, because I'd say that even Muggle isn't that nice, and they speak quite horribly. Almost all wizards speak horribly about Muggles.
Yeah.
Like, this made me cringe when I read this part in the book. When Molly Weasley comes into King's Cross and she's like, full of Muggles, obviously. Like, imagine if you said that. But I mean, they're not a minority; they're actually a majority. But imagine if you said like.
Punching down, isn't it?
About somebody else.
Yeah. That's one of the
disparaging.
Yeah, I think that's one of the inconsistencies about J.K. Rowling's writing, is that when it suited her, she wrote about it as if it was like this large slur, but when it didn't suit her, she could put it in the mouth of Molly Weasley and like it's just a throwaway comment, and it's like it's more commentary than a slur, if that makes sense. So that was one of the inconsistencies, I thought.
It was just, I don't know, kind of the attitude of the wizarding world towards Muggles. It's so kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of, even a Muggle could understand this, and they're not that stupid. It's
and I think that kind of grows and grows like through the films. Like it becomes more and more of like a slur to use as the film goes on. And that's what I mean. I think that's one of the inconsistencies of her writing. Is I don't think she realised early on what she could use the word Muggle to be. Like she could use it as like a really high slur. But yeah, I mean, I'm just purely speculating on that, I suppose.
It seems like Muggle's kind of like the kind of slur that people who aren't meaning to be racist might use, whereas Mudblood is more like the N-word hard R.
Yeah.
Of the wizarding world.
I think, do you know what? I think that's a good way to put it, actually. Yeah, I think you're right. So we've had the Sorting Hat scene, and then there's the huge, like, large dinner. Oh, I was going to ask you this, actually. Have you been to Harry Potter World?
I've not.
So I've been once, and, like, I thought that there's a few, like, main things that I really enjoyed. One was Privet Drive, but the other one was, like, this dining hall. Like, I thought that was, like, the best thing there for me, because it looks like the exact, I mean, it probably is the exact same one that they used in the films. So, like, it feels like you're in the film when you're there, but some of the other stuff I could take it all, leave it. What reminded me of watching this film.
No, I've never been. I think I might have wanted to go, but not enough to actually go, because I'm never like big on fandoms. Like I kind of, I love books and I'll read them and read them and read them, and I'll know everything that happens in a book if I love it enough. But I never kind of get into fandoms that much.
No, I completely see what you're saying, and to be fair, for us as well, it's on the opposite end of the country, so it's not like it's still on going into Manchester and it's a nice easy trip. But what I did, I went to London to see Arsenal, and like I stayed for the weekend, and because I was already in London, I thought, I might as well pick something to do like on the Sunday. So I decided, let's get Harry Potter tickets. So we just went to Harry Potter on the way back. But so dining hall, we see that scene. We start to. This is where like some filler starts to happen. Then we have all the lessons. This is where we're starting to establish some of the teachers. So Ron and Harry, they're late for class, and McGonagall turns from a cat into a human and like gives them the telling off. We have the issue with the moving stairs where they accidentally come across Fluffy the three-headed dog. He has his first lesson with Snape, where Snape's like really nasty to him. Not really nasty to him, but he's really strict with him. And then we have the flying lesson with, I can't remember her name. What's her name?
Madam Hooch.
Madam Hooch. We have the flying lesson with Madam Hooch. Neville Longbottom breaks his arm. She takes him to the hospital. Malfoy steals his little seeing ball thing that helps him to remember when he's forgetting stuff, which I think is just such a hilariously funny concept.
Yeah, because he can.
Yeah, exactly. You can't remember what you've forgotten, can you?
No.
And then
it's basically a physical embodiment of that feeling that you have where you're like, I'm sure I've forgotten something. It's just that.
Yeah, like, why did I come into this room? Like, I came here for something. Like, what we're doing? Yeah. Malfoy throws the ball. Harry Potter on the broom, quick as anything, goes and get it, catches it. McGonagall sees him. She takes him to Wood, and there we go. He's going to be the youngest Seeker in 1,000 years, whatever it is, and he's going to be on the Quidditch team. So this goes back to what we were saying before. Like, he fits right in. He's not just some weird kid anymore. He's kind of like the most popular kid in school. Like, everyone knows who he is. Everyone knows his story. He's the kid who defeated Voldemort. And now, not only that, but he's the youngest kid in 100 years. He's going to be on the Quidditch team because he's such a special guy and such a special athlete.
Yeah, and I always find it like a really interesting dynamic of Harry and Ron's friendship. Ron's got these expectations to live up to because all of his family are quite high achieving, and it almost feels like his first friend that he makes kind of does everything that he was hoping to do. Like, he gets on the Quidditch team, and you know, he ends up in the I keep going onto the wrong books, but he ends up in the Triwizard Tournament and all those things. And it's always kind of an interesting friendship dynamic that Ron's always a little bit jealous of Harry, but it never like ruins their friendship. I did like that.
Yeah, but because we read it from Harry's perspective. Can you imagine this book from like Ron's perspective? So you've got this like kid, and the first time Ron meets Harry, they get on the train. The woman says, "Do you want anything from the trolley?" And Ron's like, "No, I can't afford anything." And then this kid in front of you is like, "Oh, I'm gonna take it all." And then he's like, "Oh, I'll share it with you." He's like, "All right, cool." Then he's sharing it with you, and then you really want to be on the Quidditch team, and then this guy who you've just met, who's mega rich, he turns up, and then he gets on the team completely by accident, not even knowing what the sport is. You would be pulling your hair out, like, what's going on?
Yeah,
like that's what I want to do. What it is, and he's on the team straight away, like. And my sister fancies him to top it all off. So yeah, from Ron's perspective, this book is probably a very different story.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I suppose it would be quite an interesting story, to be honest, from Ron's point of view. This guy comes along, my family love him, and he gets on the Quidditch team and then marries my sister.
So we end up seeing the class where they're learning to like levitate, and it's Wingardium Leviosa, and Ron, he can't do it properly, so Hermione teaches him how to do it, and then he's kind of bitching about Hermione behind her back to Harry, but she hears him, she goes off crying, and then everyone hears that there's a troll in the school, and they realise, oh no, that troll is near where Hermione is, so they go to rescue her. They end up defeating the troll, which again, great kind of computer level kind of game. You've got this like new bad guy out of nowhere that you have to defeat, and you have to save the girl, and they go and do it.
Yeah, and I do think that scene, thinking back and comparing that book to film transition to some of the later series, and I'm a lot less critical of that film for what they changed, because they did really try and keep the essence of what was in the book. Like, for example, when Professor Quirrell comes running in to tell about the troll, and he says, "Troll in the dungeons. Thought you ought to know." That's literally what he says in the book, and it's very kind of British humor of him just being like, "Thought you ought to know," and just completely downplaying it and then fainting.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
very accurate to what happened in the book.
Yeah, that's exactly how it happens in the film as well. So we get that. Then I think the next scene after that is the Quidditch scene again. We've already spoke about Harry. He wins. He's not just in the Quidditch team. He's not just the main player of the sequel, but he's also winning it, and he wins it by accident as well. So, to more the frustration of your friend is getting in the team and he's the main player, youngest one in 100 years. He's also gonna win by accident because he catches the golden snitch in his mouth. He doesn't know what he's doing, but he's the best, and everyone loves him for it. And then you're sat there going, "Oh, my claim to fame is I'm his mate." I suppose. I think that's the highlight of my life. So we see that, and then there's that interesting scene where you think Snape is trying to curse Harry Potter as he's flying around, but really it's Quirrell in the background, and Hermione sets his cloak on fire. This kind of starts the ball rolling, doesn't it? On the whole, Professor Snape's a bad guy whole trope, because they suspected that he let in the troll. Now they think that he's trying to knock Harry off his broom, and they think that he's trying to get the Philosopher's Stone, and that's where Hagrid lets slip that that's a secret between Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel.
I think in the book, at least, there's a little bit of dramatic irony. Like, I might not have noticed it much as a kid, but there's definitely the clues there to who it actually is.
Yeah.
Like Professor Quirrell's always there when things happen, and there's just these little clues that it actually. And I feel like if I'd read it for the first time as an adult, I'd be like, "Oh no, Snape's a red herring. It's actually Quirrell who's the bad one." If I'd read it for the first time as an adult, but I suppose that's that's the good thing about it, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because it makes it. I think it's done clever enough that if you're a child, you're like, "Oh wow, I see what they've done there." But it's made for kids, isn't it? It's written for children at the end of the day. And like I remember when like the reveal happens, and then you start to look back on it, and you're like, "Oh, you were stood behind trying to do that." Like how did I not see it at the time? But again, I was a kid.
Yeah. Quirrell always kind of. I think Quirrell, when I first read the book, kind of scared me. Like when he takes his turban off, I think I found that pretty terrifying at the time. Some kind of possessing someone's body in that way.
Yeah, it is. It's as a child, it's definitely like a very like frightening visual and frightening idea, isn't it? And then next in the Christmas time, Hermione's going home. Ron is staying because his parents are going to see his brother in Romania when he's at the Dragons, and Harry has to stay because obviously he doesn't want to go back to the Dursleys. Now, I don't know why, but I was like, again, really jealous of Harry here. Is that like he has all Christmas to kind of just do what he wants. He's in school, but like it wasn't like my school. It was like a cool school. So like he gets to stay there all Christmas with his best mate and just chill out and hang out with his best mate all Christmas. That sounded great.
Yeah, and in a really nice castle in Scotland as well, with grounds and everything, and magic.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and yeah, it's just one of the many ways that I was jealous of Harry Potter as a child. And then again, if I wasn't jealous enough already, he gets an invisibility cloak. So now, like, that's one of the big superpowers that a lot of people want. Is I wish I could be invisible. Now he has a cloak to turn it on and off. He can be invisible whenever he wants. He can get up to whatever mischief. He goes and looks for the book, doesn't he, with the invisibility cloak? And he also sees the mirror of Erised. It shows you your true desires in front of you. And again, that sounded like such an amazing concept to me as a child.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's. I don't think it's like this in the. Is it like this in the film where he doesn't? in the film, in the book, he doesn't just see his parents in it. He sees like his entire family. Like,
It's just him and his parents in the film.
yeah, in the book he sees his whole family. But I suppose they would have had to cast a lot. I tell you one thing that always annoyed me in the films: could they not have got an actress to play his mum who had the same colour eyes as Daniel Radcliffe?
I'll be honest with you, I've never noticed that.
Because it's such like a common thing. Everyone's like, "You've got your mother's eyes," and
Yeah, you're right.
she doesn't have. They don't have the same colour eyes at all. Like even contact. Like give her some contact.
Yeah, especially because she doesn't really have much of a role, especially in the early films. Like she's just kind of stood there, like smiling, hugging Harry. Like anyone could have played that role. His real mum could have played that role.
Yeah, just put a red wig on her. If she's got the same colour eyes, then it's perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
So we end up seeing that Hagrid, he's got I mean, I might have missed some. This is the point. I'll be honest with you, folks. This is the point in the film where I stopped taking notes and I just watched it for the sake of watching it. By this point, my next note says that Hagrid got a dragon egg, and then there's this kind of rumor like between the three kids, like who would just give him a dragon egg? Who is holding the dragon egg? Maybe it's some kind of plot to get to the Philosopher's Stone. Malfoy sees them all in the hut, so they all get in trouble. All four kids get in trouble. Malfoy and the three main kids. And then McGonagall says, "Right, you've got to hang out with Hagrid," as if that's a punishment. Hagrid takes him into the forest, and then there's unicorn blood. Great scene. He puts his hand in it. It comes up, and it's this kind of glowing, kind of silvery blood. And then who comes over? It's not Greyback, is it? That comes over.
Is he called Ronan?
I think so. Yeah, the centaur.
Friends is one of the centaurs.
Yeah, he comes over and kind of tells Harry Potter that who do you think that could have been that was eating the unicorn? He starts to realize that was Dumbledore. He's not just alive, but he's here. He's very close to me, and then this really raises the stakes, doesn't it? Because
and it's quite scary when in that first one, because I don't know. I feel like in kind of the middle books, like the second, third, fourth, you have until he actually comes back. Voldemort kind of becomes this kind of almost a cartoon villain because he beats him every time, and it's only when he actually comes back to life that there starts to be a bit more stakes around him. So in that first one, the first book and the first film, that's when he's still really scary and you've not seen him yet. You don't know much about him. No one wants to talk about him, so you can kind of in the same way that horror movie villains work, you can kind of create the worst case scenario in your head for what this person is. Once you see him and know more about him, he does kind of lose that and doesn't really get it back until he actually comes back to life.
Definitely. It's that fear of the unknown, isn't it? And like we kind of see him in this kind of black kind of cloak, and we can't see his face and we can't see how he is. And again, no one will say his name. You don't really know anything about him. All you know is that he's a really bad guy and he murdered your parents. Like he's the biggest bad guy of all time, really. Like at this point, he's unbeatable. Like you beat him by some kind of luck originally.
I have noticed that. I mean, I can see why these books did so well, because they do have a lot of kids' book tropes shoved together. There's amateur detective work, there's magic, there's fantasy creatures, there's a trio of friends. There's often a trio of friends in these books, and it all takes place at a boarding school, which is a very popular setting for kids' books. Which I don't know why all kids who don't go to boarding schools are obsessed with boarding schools. I challenge anyone to disagree with me on that. I was obsessed with boarding school. I wanted to go to a boarding school. Really? Yeah. See, I don't now, but I did at the time.
My mum went to a boarding school, so I always had that perception of like, oh no, hell, I would never want to go to that. But the way it's portrayed in this story and like similar stories to this, they do kind of glamorize him a little bit, and like it does sound really cool and interesting. Like, oh, you get to hang out with your friends all the time, and like you sleep like one room apart, and like you could just get up and do whatever you want, and like just chill out and play games or mess around in the school or whatever. It sounds really interesting and fun.
Yeah, and it does in a lot of boarding school stories, to be honest.
So, right, like we're heading right towards the final scenes of the film now. We've got how does it all kick off? I can't remember how it all kicks off, but they realise that Hagrid let slip that you can get past Fluffy by playing music to him, and he'll fall asleep. Fluffy will fall asleep, and then you can get past Fluffy by doing that. So they realise, oh no, we've got to get to the Philosopher's Stone before Snape does. And the kids go, and Fluffy's already asleep, and then Fluffy wakes up, and they have to get past him that way. Then they've got to go through this kind of labyrinth things where Harry Potter's got to get a key. There's human chest. There's that weed, isn't there? That's kind of like quicksand that's devouring them.
Yeah, and it's kind of laughable, really, to think that 3 first years could make it. This is the safest place. This is safer than Gringotts. All these obstacles are so insurmountable that 3 first years get past them all.
Yeah, and it's part of that ridiculousness as an adult, but like as a child, it's oh my god, like these kids are great. Like I would never be able to do this. Look what they're doing. They're beating everything because between the 3 of them, they've got all bases covered. Like Hermione's the smart one, and Ron's the brave one, and Harry's the lucky one. And together they're going to combine all together. They're going to beat every obstacle. And you really get behind them as a kid, and you really support them because it feels like watching the film. This is my group of friends. They're doing it for us. They're going to beat Harry. They're going to beat Voldemort.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, obviously you do have to suspend kind of disbelief for stuff like that in kids' books because kids have to believe that they can do it. Otherwise, it's pretty boring. But what I find kind of I'm clicking away. What I find kind of interesting is because the series did come out over such a long period of time, and the audience did mature with the series. It's almost like the Philosopher's Stone is from a completely different series to the Deathly Hallows. Like there's even in the later books, there's even some like mild swearing.
Do you know what? You're completely right. I'd never really thought about it like that, but you are right. It is a case of the generation grew up with these books, and it's very reflective. Even if you just look at the books, the first one, very thin, maybe like 2 centimeters. As you get further along them, they get thicker and thicker and thicker, don't they? Like more and more depth.
Yeah. I have to say that with the Deathly Hallows, she did make the font size bigger to make it seem like it was as long as the previous ones, because the Deathly Hallows, which is why it annoys me that was the one that got 2 movies, it isn't actually like she made the font size bigger to make it as big, but if the font size was the same, it wouldn't actually be as big as the earlier books.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I always thought with that last film that the reason why there was 2 of them is because they got to the end of it and like they looked around the boardroom and went, "Hey lads, ladies, what do you reckon? Should we make this into 2 and like milk it as much as we can?" And everyone was like, "Oh, do you reckon we can get away with it? Of course we can. Of course we can. Like we can." Honestly, they'll pay for anything. They're so invested in this series by now. All these children are all around the world. All the boys and girls are absolutely loving it. They've watched all the first 6 films. They've read all 7 books. Let's give them 2 films now, and I promise you they're going to watch them both. Genius idea. Sheila, that's a genius idea. That's Sheila. Well done. We're doing it. And then I think that's how I always thought, like, how it happened, and that's how it came to be 2 films.
Well, it must be a scary thing for them to think of a big franchise like that coming to an end and that's made so much money, thinking, well, that's going to come to an end now.
Exactly, because it's a cash cow. Like Harry Potter really, really was a cash cow. Like, look at the books. How many different times did they release the books in like with different covers and different this and different that? Like, so many different times. And like, how many languages is it in all across the world? There's only I was going to say there's only so many times you can do that, but I imagine in our lifetimes they're going to do this like tons more times where they just Harry Potter books again in blank format where there's like no real cover, or in cartoon format where like it's all a really mega cartoony cover. Like I think they're going to do it so many different times, so many different ways to repackage it. But with the films, I think they kind of got to the end and they were like, oh no, what are we going to do? But at the same time, I think the way TV is nowadays, I think they can definitely end up doing a TV series at one point and really, really milk it then.
Yeah, further down the line, that I would not be surprised, especially since I think book adaptations kind of lend themselves more to TV series.
Yeah, because it's a longer form storytelling, like Game of Thrones. What was that, like 10 episodes per series? So like each book would be like 10 hours long rather than like 2 hours long. This film was 2.5 hours, I think.
Yeah, plus I think book readers go in for a series more because it can keep in a lot more of the details.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Before we dive too much into that, let's just round off the story then. So you can talk us through the final scene. It's Harry versus Quirrell. We realise that Quirrell has got Voldemort on the back of his head. Talk us through this one.
They realise that I think have they incapacitated Harry in some way? Because I know that it burns. It hurts his scar when Quirrell touches him, and his hands are burning. And they look in the mirror. So yeah, I didn't actually get up to this part when I was rereading the book, but I remember it very well. They're looking in the mirror, and Quirrell's like, "I can see the stone. I can see myself giving it to my master." And then Voldemort's like, "Where is it?" I've got mixed up here. This is what happens first. He's looking in the mirror and he's like, I can see myself giving the stone to my master, and you can hear Voldemort's voice going, "Where is it?"
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know. And he's like, "The boy has it," because Harry looks in the mirror and he sees himself with it in his pocket.
Yep.
And Voldemort's like, "The boy has it. Let me speak to him." And that's when Quirrell unwraps his turban, and you see his face on the back of his head, which looked awful in the movie, but it was like the 2000s, so I laid off.
Yeah.
Because a lot of stuff in that movie looked quite bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, not for the time, but now in retrospect. And when Quirrell touches Harry, his hands like blister or burn. And I can't remember if Quirrell actually dies. I think he probably dies, doesn't he? Because Harry starts grabbing hold of him to hurt him.
Yeah, I feel like he does. Yeah, I feel like he kind of shrivels away, maybe.
And Harry wins. Voldemort has a word with him in the hospital wing about how they talk about how he doesn't like Bertie Bott's every flavour beans because he once had a vomit one.
Yeah.
And then there's the house cut, and Slytherin win, but then Dumbledore, gives loads of biased points out to
Gryffindor.
Which I don't think we know this at the time, but Dumbledore. Oh yeah, we know Dumbledore was in Gryffindor, but he was also the head of Gryffindor House before he was headmaster. And it's like, could he be more biased? And we kind of think he's this great guy all the way through, but he's so biased, and he's also such an. Dumbledore is the worst. I hate Dumbledore. You made to love him so much, and he's almost evil. He's not evil, but he almost is. He's like, I don't know.
He is really biased, isn't he? I think he's kind of written to be like how we would want a teacher to be. We would want a teacher to really back us and support us. And because in the books and through the films, we're kind of a part of this trio, aren't we? Like Ron, Hermione, Harry, and us. Like we're the fourth person in that group, and like we kind of live and die off their achievements as well. So when they win the House Cup, it's like, yes, come on, we won the House Cup, even though it's not really us that's done it. It's an imaginary book, but it's kind of a part of that. But there's one thing that, again, when he beats Quirrell, he beats him by touching him, and then Dumbledore explains it that when your mother died, she in you with that love that meant that you can defeat Voldemort. I can't remember how it's explained, but it's basically like that. So it's kind of love conquers all kind of nice sentiment that like rounds off the first film was that all he needed to do, it wasn't real violence that beat him, it was love that beat him, because all he needed to do was touch him, and because he was so much well loved by his mother, that was enough to defeat him.
Yeah. I'm actually thinking J.K. Rowling's a bit of a Dumbledore, isn't she? Like, you think she's the good guy all along, and actually she's, especially reading the book back now, I'm like, oh, some of this
Yeah.
is not that nice. Like, some of the stuff about some of the descriptions of people's appearances are very cruel for a children's book. Like, there's lots of, I don't know, it's like almost all the bad characters are described as, you know, like they're fat, or they've got some kind of like a quirrel with his stutter. I mean, I think that's put on, but it's kind of like, oh, look at him, he's kind of a bit pathetic, he's got a stutter, when in actual fact it's just a thing that anyone can have. And it's kind of, I suppose, like, there were those kind of tropes in a lot of children's books, but it was interesting reading it back as someone who doesn't necessarily I don't like JK anymore. So it was interesting reading it back now and as being more critical of the choices that she made for some of it.
I think, to play devil's advocate, like, I mean, it's always a terrible excuse that people give, like, oh, it was a different time. But like, the book was written in it probably was written in about 94, because I think it was released in 96. So it was a different time, but again, that doesn't really defend stuff. And like, a certain amount of fat shaming and like words like mental and mad is used quite a lot, which isn't the most PC terms to use nowadays either. But
yeah. I think it's set in the late 80s, isn't it? Like, it started in the late 80s. It's just I was reading about this one character, Eloise Midgen, who's just basically her only point of being in the story is to get made fun of for having acne. That's about it.
Right.
Like, they reference her in a bunch of the books, and her only point of being there is to get made fun of for having acne. Like, oh, I'd rather go to the Yule Ball with Eloise Midgen. Like, it's literally the only time that she's there.
It's the kind of stuff that nowadays definitely wouldn't, and it's definitely not suitable for a child's book nowadays, is it? But so that nicely brings me on to like one of my final questions, actually. So, what do you think the legacy of? We'll just talk about this one book. We'll talk about Harry Potter 1, but what do you think the legacy of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is?
Well, to kind of sidestep the question, I guess I feel like reading it now as an adult, I can see why so many people heavily identify it, and at the same time, I can see why that's led to a lot of adults now being very kind of feeling very betrayed by J.K. Rowling, because like, she kind of wrote this story that was like wish fulfillment for weird kids.
Yeah.
And then has said some publicly quite ignorant things about some of the most marginalized people in society. So it's like, I don't know. It's I feel like its legacy now has definitely kind of been tarnished by her, but it's definitely still a good book. Like, I'm not going to say that it's not well written.
Yeah, that's one of the difficult things, isn't it? That not just with J.K. Rowling, but with anyone. For me, the first I came across was Oasis, trying to separate the art from the artists, and like it's a difficult thing for people who don't know. Like, J.K. Rowling, she's being labelled as a TERF at the moment, so she's receiving like a lot of negative reactions from a lot of people who definitely would have been in her fan base as well, because, like you said, the Harry Potter story is a true underdog story, and what she said about these people who, as you put, like, are in marginalized groups, like you feel as an underdog in those groups, don't you? Like anyone who is in a marginalized group, you are an underdog. And for someone who would write such a story to really uplift an underdog and like give you someone to really relate to, for them to say the things that she said, like it kind of does let you down. Do you know what I mean?
And there's definitely like, for example, it kind of boggles the mind, really, when you think of how the majority of the discrimination in Harry Potter is against people who are not born into the wizarding world, to then
Yeah.
turn around and discriminate against trans people for not being born the way they identify.
Yeah.
It's there's such a kind of mental disconnect between the kind of theme of the books of like you'll find a community that accepts you and you'll be the person you're meant to be, but in actual life she's thinking stuff like that.
Yeah, I've not thought of it like that before, but yeah, that is a very great point that you bring up, and that is a huge disconnect.
Yeah, and also I can't remember where I got this. Somebody, oh, actually, I do know where I got this from. I got this from Lindsay Ellis on YouTube. She said that when people talk about separating the art from the artist, it's really hard to do that with J.K. Rowling because she's striven to remain a part of that art. Like she's very much claimed it. Like she's always adding to it, adding to the world. She's very much like claimed the world of Harry Potter. It's very synonymous with her. So it's really hard, especially with that particular piece of art, to divorce it from her mentally. Whereas with some people, you know, it's a bit easier because they make the art, they put it out, they don't mention it again.
Yeah, so say for example, if J.K. Rowling didn't write, she was the producer of these films or the director of these films, it would be a lot easier to separate. So quickly then, let's go over the rest of the books. So we've got Harry Potter 2. Let's start with Chamber of Secrets. What's your quick thoughts on Chamber of Secrets? As we both mentioned, it's the first book we both read. I'm sure, well, as in terms of Harry Potter for you, but my first book completely that I read by choice for me. So I'm sure it holds like near and dear thoughts for us both. So what do you think of number 2?
I really liked number 2. I think that Gilderoy Lockhart's a really good kind of all the Harry Potter books, they kind of have like a second class baddie, don't they? They have Voldemort and then they have like the sub baddie. Like the first boss that they have to beat before they get to Voldemort.
Yeah.
And I thought Gilderoy Lockhart was great because I don't know, he's such a bit of a you know, different kind of villain.
He's a bit of a chancer, isn't he, Gilderoy Lockhart?
Yeah, and like
he really puts himself across as like something special, but he's just a guy who's just kind of fallen into place, and like kind of the opposite of Harry Potter, where Harry Potter himself falls into place, into the right situations, and comes out on the right side. Gilderoy Lockhart does that, but he really bigs himself up for it, and he really tries to take advantage of that at every step of the way.
Yeah, he's I liked him, and it's quite a light-hearted book. His Chamber of Secrets. I like that you find out a lot more about Voldemort in that, which obviously was weird for me reading the Philosopher's Stone after reading the Chamber of Secrets and already knowing quite a bit about Voldemort. The whole Ginny having a crush on Harry thing is so cringe.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it rings true. I remember what it was like being an 11-year-old with a crush on someone, but it's so.
I suppose if it rings true, then she's kind of at the. No, I always kind of felt a bit like, but okay. Let's move on to number 3 then. Number Azkaban, right?
Yes, I remember when I remember reading The Prisoner of Azkaban and thinking that she'd made a mistake because I remembered Sirius Black's name from the first one, and then that turned out to be intentional. I remember thinking, oh wow, she had these planned ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because I was like, Sirius Black, but he was mentioned in the first one, and then it turned out to be intentional. I thought she just like reused a character name at first.
Yeah.
That's me, a cynical kid, being like,
Yeah.
oh, she's reused that name instead of like taking her at face value. But no, I actually really liked that one because I love werewolves and I loved that there was a werewolf. That's probably my second favourite out of all of the books.
Right, because I remember exactly when I would have read this, because like I said, I went to Poland 6-week holidays, 2002. You know, that 6-week holidays when you're in school. So literally, as soon as I got back, I told my sister, go to your room, get me book number 3. I want to read it like straight away. So I would have read it like around September, October 2002 when I would have read that. And I remember like a kind of feeling of like elation when you find out that Sirius Black is Harry Potter's godfather, and not just that, but he wants to take Harry Potter in, and he wants to be like the father that he's missed all these years. And I remember being like, so like, oh my god, this is fantastic. And then does he die in this one? Or does he die in the next one? But when he died, I was like so gutted. I was like, I felt like something had been.
I think he dies in. Is it the Order of the Phoenix? What's the one after the Order of the Phoenix?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll be able to pull this up. But I remember when he died, just feeling like I'd lost something and being like, oh no. I was really looking forward to that part of the story, but obviously it was an integral part of like continuing the story of Harry Potter struggle and stuff like that. But yeah, I remember that real sense of sorrow. Oh wait, I think it was in the 4th. What's the 4th book?
The 4th one's the Goblet of Fire, and then I think it's the Order of the Phoenix, and then it's the. Is it the Order of the Phoenix? No, I think I've skipped one. This is really bad. I kind of cross as a really bad Harry fan here.
Right, so Harry Potter books. We've got Philosopher Stone, Chamber of Secrets, Prisoner of Azkaban, Goblet of Fire, Order of the Phoenix, Half-Blood Prince, and the Deathly Hallows. So
how did I forget the Half-Blood Prince? I forgot the Half-Blood Prince. I can't believe that.
Do you know what? I remembered exactly when he dies. It's in the Order of the Phoenix, which came out in 2003, and I remember it's this one because in 2003 I was in year 10 in school, and Michael Collier came into maths class and yelled out, Sirius Black died in Harry Potter. And I was like, what the fuck? I can't believe he's just fucking like. The swearing I'm saying now is literally what was going through my head at the time. I was so angry that he spoiled it for me, because what would happen is we would get the book, and because my sister was a bigger fan than me, we had like an agreement between the two of us that she could read it first. So like, and to be fair as well, she was a much quicker. She was younger than me, but she is younger than me still. And she's a much quicker reader than me. So she would get the book first. She would be able to read it first, like in however many days it would take her. Then I would get the book after that, and that was always our agreement. So because I'd not read it, and we had it on day one, but she was reading it, and like when he said that, I was like so devastated. Like I remember like coyly saying to my sister, because I really wanted to discuss it with her, like, have you got to like a big part yet where somebody dies? Because I didn't want to spoil it for her. And she was like, yeah, but I don't want to spoil it for you. I was like, oh, I already know who it is. It's SB. And she was like, oh yeah. And we got talking about it, and I was so gutted. And I'm going off on a tangent here, but yeah, go on.
No, I remember being pretty gutted by that as well, because it did seem like Harry was finally going to get to have a family. And also Sirius Black, he never got his name cleared within his lifetime, and he was,
He didn't.
a good character. I do think that's when That was when the books started. Kind of the Goblet of Fire onwards is when they started to get a bit darker.
Yeah, 100%.
And
so let's just cover Goblet of Fire actually then. Like, what did you think of Goblet of Fire?
Well, that was the first big one, wasn't it? That was the first chunky one.
Yeah. I remember being really
started to get long.
excited, like, because it was so big. Like, I always used to think as a kid, like, in terms of media, the more you had of it, the better it was. So any album that had like 25 songs, to me, that was better. That was going to be better than if it had 10 songs on, which I know now is not the case. It's mostly the opposite. But when I saw the size of the book, I was like, oh my God, that's going to be so good. I cannot wait to dive into that book and like really enjoy it. And this is what, like, I'm not a huge reader. Anyone who really knows listens to this going, you're honest there, you've been honest. But yeah, it's the only time in my life I really look forward to diving into books, and it started with Order of the Phoenix, really.
Yeah, it was definitely it had a lot of detail, and I'm the kind of nerd who I like to know loads of stuff about the world of the book.
Yeah.
Like a lot of stuff that people won't care about. I love to hear more about the world that the story takes place in. And I feel like details that a lot of people would find boring in media, I really love. So like that one kind of went a lot into, you know, what the mermaids that live in the lake were like,
Yeah.
and you know, there were other schools. You got to find out about some of the other in the wizarding world, which is interesting to me, and
it created more dimensions to the universe, didn't it? Because you like when you first read the book, you kind of just feel like Hogwarts is the only school. I think they might mention that it's the best school, but because they don't mention them, you kind of feel like, oh, Hogwarts is really the only school that does witchcraft. And when you start to explore this universe, going, oh no, there's Crom's from Bulgaria, and he must go to this school, and we've got this other school over here.
It was the first book where you got the sense of it being a wizarding world and not just
Hogwarts.
Yeah.
Okay, then what about number 6 then? What did you think of the Half-Blood Prince?
Well, I loved it so much that we've skipped the Order of the Phoenix. Oh wait, no, we didn't. I was thinking of the Goblet. Yeah, we did. We skipped the Order of the Phoenix.
Order of the Phoenix is the one where Sirius Black dies. But yeah, you can cover Order of the Phoenix.
I was talking about the Goblet of Fire just then, to be completely honest.
Right.
But Order of the Phoenix is similar. Like Order of the Phoenix is similar in a different way. Like that's the one where you find out more about the Ministry.
Yeah.
You find out more about the inner workings of the Order of the Phoenix, and you kind of find out more about what was like politically what Voldemort was doing when he was around, rather than just, you know, him being a vague baddie. You get to see him as more of a political figure with a following who, you know, I feel like that the books started to turn more adult then, and you can see how that side of him would be more scary to an adult who could draw parallels to real political figures and scenarios.
Yeah.
Whereas in the first couple of ones, it's more, oh, he's evil, oh, he's going to get this big magic and kill me.
Yeah.
Well, that's the scariest thing for a kid. They're not worried he's going to take your rights away.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was another big one for world building and you know, fleshing out the world. I'm always happy to have that in a book. Like probably some of my favorite books are probably ones that a lot of people find boring for that reason. Like, oh, I want to know how the spaceship works. I want to know, where do the cooks live? do you have civilians on the ship?
Yeah.
I don't know. I like boring details, but yeah, the Half-Blood Prince I liked so much that I forgot that it existed. But I did actually like it, and I did actually think that it was Snape all along, Half-Blood Prince, and I was like, yes, when I ended up to be right.
My recollection of this book is like, this is the one book that I really kind of saw. Like, I think when I got it, I must have like breezed through it and read it as quickly as possible because I really wanted to like learn, like get it all in, all the information. And I think this is the one that I really know the least about.
Yeah, I feel like it was by this point, I feel like it was like, get to book 7, get to the final battle,
Yeah.
because a lot of stuff does happen in the Half-Blood Prince, but it's no one's favourite.
Yeah.
And thinking about it now, it does have some good storylines, like Dumbledore dies in it, and they've got that awe scene where he has to blow the potion, which is just I hated that. And the what are they called? They're like they're zombies, but they're not zombies. They're animated by a spell, and they've got a name. It's going to annoy me, but I'll probably not be able to remember until later on. You'll get a message from me just yelling
Yeah.
Inferi,
Emperor, yeah.
an Inferius animated corpse. That was really like dark and a lot more grown up. Loved that scene. Loved finding out that Regulus Black was a good guy all along. That was the true Slytherin redemption story. Napes isn't worth shit, but yeah, loved that.
How about the Deathly Hallows then? The final book.
That's actually my favourite book, even though I don't agree with her. I don't agree with her making it falsely making it longer by making the letters bigger.
Yeah.
And the line spacing. But she might not have chosen to do that. That might have been the publishers saying, "Oh, well, it can't be thinner than the earlier ones."
Yeah.
It was probably them and not her. But I feel like that one was. It was packed with action, but it also wasn't. Like, there was a lot of them walking around and kind of like not knowing what to do. But that was real.
Yeah.
They're teenagers. They're all 17-year-olds. They wouldn't have known really what to do. And I feel like a lot of people get that, the thought of being a 17-year-old and desperately like wanting to help the world. How? I feel like that's very. One thing that annoyed me in the film is there's a particular. I can't remember whether it's Deathly Hallows 1 or 2 film, but because I don't think I even watched this. I don't think I even watched the. Actually, no, I did watch them both, but I wasn't crazy about them. There's a bit where Hermione goes, we should have disguised ourselves as muggles, and it was so hard for me not to scream at the screen in the cinema. You did in the book! Because they did in the book.
Yeah.
They went around disguised as muggles. They used Polyjuice Potion. And I get that might not necessarily. You want to see Emma Watson on screen. You want to get your money's worth out of having Emma Watson on screen.
Yeah.
But imagine how like there would have been a twist of humour to that scene if she'd been disguised as some random middle-aged woman. And if you think about the scene where where Hermione disguises herself as Bellatrix Lestrange, and so you've got Helena Bonham Carter pretending to be Emma Watson, pretending to be Hermione, pretending to be Bellatrix, and how funny that scene is because of it, because it's Helena playing Emma as Hermione. It would have been like an interesting little twist of humour on that scene. If it had just been some unknown actress just playing Hermione for the purpose of the scene, and then you could have the Polyjuice Potion fading off and turning back into Emma Watson for the most important part, whilst the thing of they were disguised. Yeah, so that was one of my favourite books and one of the movies that I hated the most.
I think that's always the way, isn't it? I think the more you like the book, the less you're going to like the film, aren't you? You're tied to one form of medium. It's just natural, isn't it? But I remember with this book, I told you before that me and my sister, we had that kind of schedule where she can read it first and I can read it next. Because it's the last one, I couldn't wait. We bought the book. I might have somewhere on the internet, I might have found like a PDF document that might have had the entire book on there, and I might have read it that way. I remember it was the summer before uni, and I remember thinking like, I can't wait for my sister to read it and like me get it afterwards. I've got to read it now. So like I can put all this behind me. I can put Harry Potter behind me. I don't have to go to uni with the book in my pocket and having to like cheekily read it in like the background and like it'd be like my secret little shame that I read Harry Potter books at uni, even though I'm pretty sure everybody else did as well. But yeah, my recollections of it really, really low. But let's round this all off. Go back to Harry Potter 1. Not Chamber of Secrets, Philosopher's Stone. If you're going to give this a score out of 10, what score are you giving it?
I'd say I'm going to give it a 6. Because it's definitely a good children's book, but reading it back, I see more issues with it that I didn't realize as a kid, and but I always think that people have a very skewed view of rating systems. Like people think a 6 is really bad, but it's still above average.
Sure. For me, I'm going to give it an 8, only because I saw the film first, and because I watched the film, it led me on a path of reading the books. And I'm not a strong reader now. I'm not a big reader now, but I wouldn't have been a reader whatsoever if it wasn't for this film. So because it kind of opened the doorway for me, I'm going to give it a nice solid 8. But Rou, I think we've come to the end of it today.
Yeah. Oh, it's
so
been good.
Before we get off, is there anything that you want to plug?
Not really. I think I'm not doing any gigs or anything for the foreseeable future. So.
Fair enough. Well, thank you very, very much for coming on. Thank you all for listening. Subscribe button. I'll be back soon with more.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Just coming on.